Millionaire abandons wife for being infertile. 10 years later, he sees triplets identical to him crying at her funeral. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know. Now, let's get into this incredible story. The ears of silence. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. So you're saying this is my fault, Richard? Emily Thompson asked, fighting back tears as she stared at her husband across their mahogany dining table. The Chicago skyline glittered behind him, through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their penthouse, indifferent to the marriage crumbling inside. 5 years, Emily. 5 years trying. Richard loosened his silk tie and tossed aside the merger documents he'd been reviewing. My mother had 4 children. My younger sister already has 2. Even your cousin who married after us is expecting. The doctor said we need more tests. You haven't even— I don't need any tests, Richard interrupted, slamming his palm on the table. Crystal glasses trembled. Every man in my family has children. Obviously, the problem isn't with me. Emily took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. Her work as a constitutional law professor had taught her to handle conflicts, but nothing prepared her for this moment. Richard, you're a brilliant attorney. Where's your logic? You can't simply presume. Logic? He laughed without humor. The logic is I'm wasting time. Do you know what the firm is worth today? $50 million? And who am I going to leave it all to? So that's all this is? An heir for your empire? Emily's voice cracked. Richard stood, adjusting his Italian suit that cost more than 3 months of her university salary. I'll have the papers sent over from the office tomorrow. I don't want to fight. You can keep the condo. I can't believe you're doing this, Emily whispered, tears finally falling. It's better for both of us. You can move on, maybe find someone who can. His voice trailed off. Richard's phone rang. He checked the screen and answered immediately. Mr. Daniels, yes, about that merger. Of course, we can resolve this now. While he spoke, Emily studied the man she'd married 5 years ago. The same man she'd met in law school when she was still an intern, and he was a promising young attorney. Now at 42, Richard Thompson was one of the most respected names in corporate law in Chicago. I need to go, he announced, pocketing his phone. Important merger, millions at stake. There are always millions at stake, aren't there, Richard? Emily replied bitterly. And how much am I worth in your calculation? Richard grabbed his Italian leather briefcase and paused at the living room door. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You're young, beautiful, intelligent. You can have an incredible life. You just can't give me what I need. You haven't even tried to find out if the problem is yours. There is no problem with me, he exploded. Every Thompson man has children. My father had 3. My grandfather had 5. It's genetics. That wouldn't hold up in any courtroom, counselor, she provoked, using the title he cherished. We're not in a courtroom, he replied coldly. You'll receive the papers tomorrow. Please don't complicate things. It's decided. When the door closed, Emily remained alone in the luxury penthouse that suddenly felt too cold. On the wall, their wedding photo showed 2 smiling young people, she in her simple dress, he already wearing a designer suit. Genetics, she whispered, wiping away tears. We'll see who's right, Mr. Richard Thompson. She rose and retrieved the card her gynecologist had given her at their last appointment. It was time to get all possible tests done, alone, and discover the truth her husband was so afraid to face. Emily's mind drifted back to 13 years earlier. The Yale Law Library smelled of old books and ambition. She was buried in constitutional law textbooks when a shadow fell across her table. Excuse me, is this seat taken? The tall man with confident blue eyes didn't wait for an answer before sitting down. I'm using the whole table, Emily responded, gesturing to her sprawled research. I'm Richard Thompson. I only need a corner. His smile had a practiced charm. I have a mock trial in an hour, and this is the quietest spot in the library. Reluctantly, Emily cleared a small space. Emily Jenkins, constitutional law. Criminal law, he replied. 3rd year, you? 2nd. teaching assistant for Professor Harrington. Richard raised an eyebrow, impressed. Harrington only takes the best. They worked in silence until Richard closed his laptop. You know, Emily? Jenkins, you're the first person who hasn't immediately asked about my family's law firm when hearing my name. Should I have? She asked, genuinely confused. He laughed, and for the first time it seemed unguarded. No, it's refreshing. That chance meeting led to coffee, which led to dinner. Richard was brilliant, ambitious, and underneath his polished exterior, surprisingly vulnerable about living up to his family legacy. Their courthouse wedding 3 years later was small but elegant. Richard's parents attended with obvious disappointment. It wasn't a grand affair at their Connecticut estate. Emily's parents, both high school teachers from Michigan, seemed overwhelmed by their new in-laws. We'll show them, Richard whispered during their first dance. We'll build our own legacy better than theirs. For a while, they were happy. Richard made partner at his father's firm by 30, becoming the youngest in the firm's history. Emily finished her doctorate and joined Chicago University's law faculty. They traveled to exotic locations, networked at exclusive events, and planned for the future. Let's start trying, Richard suggested on their second anniversary, gesturing around their newly purchased penthouse. This place needs children. Emily remembered smiling, kissing him, feeling like everything was falling perfectly into place. The first year of trying was exciting, the second concerning. By the third, doctor appointments replaced romantic evenings. By the fourth, silence and resentment filled their home. And now, in their 5th year of marriage, Richard had simply given up. As Emily stared at their wedding photo, she realized something had been broken long before tonight. Richard's love had always been conditional, on success, on status, on her ability to give him an heir. With trembling fingers, she took the photo down and placed it face down in a drawer. 3 months before the separation, Dr. Samantha Chen's office was quiet when Emily squeezed Richard's hand during their consultation. The preliminary tests don't indicate any apparent issues with you, Mrs. Thompson, the doctor explained, adjusting her glasses. But we need to conduct a more thorough investigation with both of you. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Doctor, I didn't come here for tests. I came to find out what's wrong with my wife. Emily felt her face burn with embarrassment. Dr. Chen maintained her professionalism, but her gaze showed disapproval. Mr. Thompson, infertility is an issue that affects both partners. In 40% of cases, the male factor is impossible. Richard cut in. My entire family. Your family isn't you, Emily murmured, releasing his hand. On the drive back home, the silence in the car was deafening. Emily finally spoke. Why can't we just do all the tests? What are you afraid of? I'm not afraid of anything, he answered coldly, eyes fixed on traffic. I just won't waste time on something unnecessary. At home, their routine transformed into a minefield. Attempts to conceive, once moments of intimacy, became mechanical, scheduled sessions. The ovulation calendar on the refrigerator seemed to mock them. Now, as morning light filtered through the blinds, Emily sat at her vanity staring at the divorce papers that had been delivered by courier. Richard hadn't come home last night. His side of the closet was already half empty, suits and shirts removed with surgical precision. She reached for her phone and dialed her sister's number. Olivia, it's me. He's leaving. Yes. I need a lawyer. Tomorrow, she would begin fighting for herself, but today she would allow herself to grieve for the marriage she thought she had, for the children they never conceived, for the love that had withered under the weight of expectations. Mrs. Thompson, the receptionist called. Dr. Chen will see you now. Emily entered the consultation room alone. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the seat across from her gynecologist. No Mr. Thompson today? Dr. Chen asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. We're separating, Emily replied, her voice steadier than she expected. But I still wanted to get my results. Dr. Chen nodded, opening a folder on her desk. I understand, and I have to say I'm glad you came back. She placed several documents in front of Emily, pointing to highlighted sections. Your test results are completely normal, Emily. There's no physiological reason you can't conceive. Emily stared at the papers, a mixture of vindication and grief washing over her. So I'm not. You're perfectly fertile, Dr. Chen confirmed gently. In fact, your hormone levels and egg reserves are excellent for your age. A tear slipped down Emily's cheek. He was so certain it was me. Without testing, Mr. Thompson, we can't determine definitively where the issue lies, Dr. Chen explained. But based on statistics and your results, there's a strong possibility the fertility issues are on his side. Emily nodded, absorbing this information that had come too late to save her marriage. What now? She asked quietly. Dr. Chen leaned forward. That depends on what you want, Emily. The divorce is proceeding? Yes, it'll be final in 3 months. Then I suggest you take this time to think about your future. You have options if you still want children. Emily left the clinic, clutching the folder to her chest like armor. In her car, she sat motionless, staring at her phone. Richard needed to know. But would it change anything? Or would his pride reject this evidence too? 3 weeks later, Emily found herself outside Richard's office building. She hadn't been here in months. Not since the firm's Christmas party where Richard had introduced her as the brilliant professor rather than his wife. A subtle distinction that had stung at the time but now seemed prophetic. His assistant's eyes widened at the sight of her. Mrs. Thompson, he's in a meeting. I'll wait, Emily replied, taking a seat in the reception area. An hour passed before Richard emerged from the conference room, laughing with 2 other attorneys. He froze when he saw her. Emily. What are you doing here? We need to talk, privately. In his corner office with its spectacular view of Lake Michigan, Richard stood behind his desk, maintaining distance between them. If this is about the settlement, it's not, Emily interrupted, placing the folder on his desk. These are my test results. Complete fertility workup. I'm perfectly capable of having children, Richard. He glanced at the folder without opening. And you came here to what, prove me wrong? I came here because I thought you deserved to know the truth, she replied. The problem was never me. Richard's expression hardened. So now I'm the problem. That's not what Did you expect me to beg you to come back? Fall to my knees in remorse? Emily shook her head, suddenly seeing her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, with painful clarity. No, I don't expect anything from you anymore. As she turned to leave, Richard called after her. The divorce papers. Have you signed them? Emily paused at the door. Yes, your empire is safe. But you should know, Richard, your legacy isn't. 2 months later, the divorce was final. Emily sat in her attorney's office, signing the last documents. He was quite generous with the settlement, her lawyer noted. Emily nodded. Guilt money, she thought. Or perhaps, knowing Richard, a way to ensure her silence about his potential infertility. What will you do now, Emily? Her attorney asked. She thought of the apartment she'd leased near the university, the department chair position she'd been offered, and the appointment she'd scheduled at the fertility clinic. I'm going to live on my terms, she answered, and write my own story. Professor Jenkins, your next class starts in 15 minutes. Emily looked up from her desk, momentarily disoriented. After 6 months, she still sometimes forgot she had reclaimed her maiden name. Thank you, Amanda. I'll be right there. She gathered her lecture notes on constitutional law and straightened the nameplate on her desk. Professor Emily Jenkins, Ph.D., Department Chair. The promotion had come as a surprise, though her colleagues insisted it was long overdue. Her office at Chicago University was smaller than the home study she'd shared with Richard, but it was entirely hers, filled with books she loved, awards she'd earned, and not a single reminder of her former life. Well, almost none. The copy of her divorce decree remained locked in her desk drawer, a reminder of both an ending and a beginning. Her phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Dinner tonight? Got big news. Emily smiled. Yes, your place at 7? I'll bring wine. The campus was alive with spring energy as Emily crossed the quad toward her classroom. Students lounged on the grass. Professors hurried between buildings and tour groups followed guides with practiced enthusiasm. Professor Jenkins, a young woman, waved from a bench. Jessica Martinez, one of her most promising students now in her final year. Your article on gender bias in family court was cited in my internship yesterday, Jessica said excitedly. Judge Wilson mentioned you specifically. Emily felt a flush of professional pride. That's wonderful, Jessica. How's the internship going? Amazing, I'm learning so much. Actually, I wanted to ask. She hesitated. Would you write me a recommendation for Harper & Williams? They're accepting applications for their associate program. Of course, they'd be lucky to have you. Later, as Emily lectured on privacy rights and bodily autonomy, she caught herself touching her abdomen in a gesture that had become unconscious since her appointment at Lakeside Fertility Clinic. 3 weeks ago, the court's decision establishes that reproductive choices fall within the constitutional right to privacy, she explained to the RAP students. This has profound implications for how we understand autonomy over our own bodies. The irony wasn't lost on her. After class, Emily drove to her sister's apartment in Lincoln Park. Olivia, younger by 2 years but often the more practical of the two, greeted her with a crushing hug. Let me look at you, Olivia said, stepping back. You look good, Em. Really good. I feel good, Emily replied, surprised to find it was true. What's your big news? Olivia beamed, holding up her left hand where a modest diamond sparkled. Mark, proposed last night? Oh my God, Emily squealed, grabbing her sister's hand. It's beautiful. How did he tell me everything? Over dinner, Olivia recounted her boyfriend's nervous but sweet proposal at the botanical garden. Emily listened, genuinely happy for her sister, yet feeling an undercurrent of something like longing. Enough about me, Olivia said, refilling their wine glasses. How was your appointment? Emily had told only her sister about her decision to explore single motherhood through sperm donation. Informative. A bit overwhelming, Emily admitted. Dr. Williams walked me through everything, the process, success rates, legal considerations. And I'm going forward with it. Olivia reached across the table to squeeze her hand. I'm proud of you, Em. There's something else, Emily said, her voice dropping. When I was selecting donor profiles, they asked about physical characteristics I preferred. That makes sense. I found myself choosing traits that would make the child look like me, or like my family. Also, makes sense. But I realized I was also selecting traits similar to Richard's. Olivia's eyebrows shot up. Why would you do that? Emily struggled to articulate what had been an instinctive decision. Not because I miss him or want some connection. It just seemed practical to have a child who might resemble both parents, even if one is just a donor. Are you sure that's all it is? I'm reclaiming my life, Liv. This isn't about Richard. It's about the family I always wanted, on my terms. Later, that night in her quiet apartment, Emily opened her laptop and logged into the clinic's secure portal. The profile she had tentatively selected stared back at her. Donor number 8742, height 6'2", hair, dark brown eyes, blue education, JD Ivy League interests, chess, swimming, classical music. Her finger hovered over the confirm selection button. Was she making the right choice? Would this decision one day be questioned by her child, by others, by herself? With a deep breath, she clicked, setting in motion a future she could only begin to imagine. Today we're honored to welcome Dr. Nathan Miller, one of the country's foremost experts on medical ethics and reproductive law. Dean Harrison's introduction echoed through the packed university auditorium. Emily sat in the second row, surrounded by colleagues from the law faculty. As chair of the department, she'd been instrumental in arranging this distinguished lecture series, though she hadn't expected to find the first speaker quite so compelling. Dr. Miller approached the podium with quiet confidence. Tall with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind modern glasses, he appeared to be in his early 40s. His reputation preceded him. Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins Fellowship, landmark publications on patient autonomy. "Thank you for that generous introduction," he began with a warm smile. "I'm delighted to be at Chicago University to discuss the ethical frontiers of reproductive medicine." Emily found herself leaning forward slightly, notepad ready, but momentarily forgotten. "The technology that allows us to create life outside the womb has advanced faster than our legal and ethical frameworks," Dr. Miller continued. "Today I'd like to explore how these gaps affect real people making the most personal decisions imaginable." For the next hour, he spoke eloquently about the intersection of law, medicine, and human dignity. Emily was impressed by his balanced approach, rigorous in analysis but deeply compassionate in application. During the Q&A session, Emily raised her hand. "Dr. Miller, you mentioned the varying legal status of anonymous donors. Could you elaborate on how the courts are treating donor privacy versus a child's right to genetic information?" Their eyes met across the auditorium. "Excellent question, Professor Jenkins, Emily Jenkins." He nodded with recognition. "I cited your article on family court bias in my last paper. To answer your question." His thoughtful response sparked a brief exchange that continued after the lecture ended, as faculty and guests gathered for a reception in the law building's atrium. "Professor Jenkins," Dr. Miller approached holding 2 glasses of wine. "I hoped we might continue our discussion." She accepted the glass with a smile. "Please, call me Emily." "Nathan," he offered in return. "Your question touched on something I've been researching for my next book, the evolving definition of parenthood in an age where genetics, gestation, and child-rearing might involve different individuals." Their conversation flowed easily from legal precedents to ethical dilemmas, from theoretical frameworks to practical implications. Emily found herself sharing more than she'd intended about her courses and research, drawn in by his genuine interest and insightful comments. "I should mention I'm in Chicago for a month as a visiting scholar at Northwestern," Nathan said as the reception wound down. "I'd love to continue this conversation sometime, perhaps over coffee?" Emily hesitated only briefly. "I'd like that." The following week they met at a quiet cafe near campus. Their academic discussion quickly gave way to more personal conversation. His work with international medical rights organizations, her passion for teaching constitutional law, shared tastes in literature and music. "What brought you to medical ethics specifically?" Emily asked, curious about his path. Nathan's expression grew reflective. "My sister had fertility issues years ago. The legal and ethical maze she navigated to have her daughter was eye-opening. I was already practicing medical law, but that experience showed me how deeply personal these supposedly academic questions really are." Emily nodded, feeling a surprising connection. "The law can feel very abstract until it touches your life directly." "Exactly." His gaze was warm but respectful. "May I ask what drew you to constitutional law?" "The foundation of everything," she replied. "How we define rights, freedoms, personhood. It all starts there. And ends there too sometimes," he added, thoughtfully. As they parted ways later, Nathan hesitated. "I'm giving a talk on reproductive autonomy at the medical school next Thursday. It's more specialized than the lecture series, but you might find it interesting." "I'd like that," Emily said, surprised by how much she meant it. Over the next 3 weeks, what began as professional courtesy evolved into genuine friendship. They attended each other's lectures, exchanged articles and book recommendations, and met for coffee or dinner to discuss ideas that spanned their fields. Emily found herself looking forward to these meetings more than she cared to admit. Nathan was brilliant without arrogance, kind without condescension, and attentive without expectation. Qualities she'd forgotten could exist in combination. On a rainy Tuesday, they took shelter in the university's glass-domed conservatory after a campus-wide power outage canceled his guest lecture. "Nature's way of forcing academics to take a break," Nathan joked as they walked among tropical plants. I have a confession, Emily said suddenly. I've been thinking about something you said in your first lecture, about reproductive choices, reflecting our deepest values. Oh? His expression was open, encouraging. I'm considering having a child through artificial insemination, she said quietly. As a single mother. She hadn't planned to share this with anyone but Olivia, yet the words came easily with Nathan. He nodded thoughtfully. That's a significant decision. I've always wanted children, Emily continued. My ex-husband and I tried for years without success. After the divorce, I discovered the fertility issues weren't on my side, and now you're reclaiming that dream on your own terms, Nathan said with understanding. Does that seem selfish? Bringing a child into the world without a father? I think what's selfish is imposing our narrow definitions of family on others, he replied. Children need love, stability, and support. There are many ways to provide that. Emily felt something tight in her chest loosen. I've already selected a donor. I have an appointment at Lakeside Fertility next week to begin the process. Lakeside has an excellent reputation, Nathan nodded. Dr. Williams is a leader in the field. How did you know I'm seeing Dr. Williams? He smiled. She uses my ethics, guidelines in her practice. Small world. As they finished their impromptu conservatory tour, Nathan hesitated at the entrance. Emily, I hope this doesn't cross any boundaries, but if you ever want someone to talk to about this process, someone who understands the medical and legal aspects, I'm here. The genuine concern in his eyes touched her. Thank you, Nathan. That means more than you know. Walking to her car, Emily realized she was smiling despite the rain. For the first time in years, she felt not just understood, but supported in her choices, a feeling as unexpected as it was welcome. Once more, Emily. Deep breath in, Dr. Williams instructed, guiding the ultrasound wand across Emily's abdomen. Emily stared at the ceiling, trying to manage her anxiety. This was her third appointment at Lakeside Fertility Clinic, each step bringing her closer to potential motherhood. Everything looks perfect, the doctor confirmed. Your uterine lining is ideal for implantation. We're on track for next week. Emily sat up after the examination, adjusting her clothing. And the donor specimen? Already secured and verified. Donor DIR 8742 has one of our highest success rates. In the privacy of Dr. Williams' office, Emily reviewed the final paperwork. Pages of consent forms, legal documents protecting the donor's anonymity, and acknowledgments of her rights and responsibilities as a single mother by choice. Any final questions before we schedule the procedure? Dr. Williams asked. Emily hesitated. Is it normal to feel terrified? The doctor smiled warmly. Completely normal. Every parent-to-be feels that way, whether they're doing this alone with a partner or through traditional means. Outside the clinic, Emily found Nathan waiting on a bench reading a medical journal. She'd been surprised when he offered to drive, her to the appointment even more surprised when she accepted. How did it go? He asked, closing his journal. Good. We're set for next week. Emily sat beside him, suddenly overwhelmed. This is really happening. He nodded, his presence steady and reassuring. Second thoughts? Not about having a child, she clarified. Just the magnitude of it all. That never goes away, from what I've observed, Nathan said. My sister says parenthood is constantly realizing you're in over your head, then somehow finding your footing anyway. Emily laughed. That's comforting, I think. Let me buy you lunch, he suggested. Celebrate this milestone. At a nearby cafe, Emily found herself sharing details she'd kept private even from Olivia. I've been reading everything I can find on solo parenting, she admitted. Building support networks, financial planning, how to answer the inevitable, questions from a child about their origins. You're already being a thoughtful mother, Nathan observed. Emily stirred her tea absently. I've also been thinking about what to tell people, colleagues, students, acquaintances. There will be assumptions, judgments, about your choice to become a single mother, that, and about the donor. I selected someone with certain characteristics. Nathan waited, allowing her space to continue. "He has physical traits similar to my ex-husband," Emily finally said. "Not because I have lingering feelings, but because I thought it might be easier for the child if there were no obvious questions about their appearance." "That's actually quite common," Nathan assured her. "It's a practical consideration." "Is it? Sometimes I wonder if I'm still letting Richard dictate my choices." Nathan considered this thoughtfully. "There's a difference between being influenced by our past and being controlled by it. This sounds like a decision you've made with your child's future in mind." Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Thank you for understanding, and for being here." "I'm glad to be," he replied simply. That evening, Emily called Olivia with an update. "Next week. I can't believe my big sister is really doing this," Olivia exclaimed. "Do you want me to come with you?" "Actually, Nathan offered to drive me." A pointed silence followed. "What?" Emily asked. "Nathan, huh? The ethics professor who's been taking you to lunch and walking you to your car and just happening to be available whenever you need someone?" "It's not like that," Emily protested. "He's knowledgeable about the process. It's helpful to have someone who understands." Olivia hummed skeptically. "And the fact that he's handsome, intelligent, and clearly interested in you is just a coincidence. We're not," Emily fumbled. "This isn't the time for anything like that. I'm about to try to become a mother. Life doesn't always wait for the perfect timing, Em." After they hung up, Emily stood by her apartment window watching the city lights. Tomorrow, she would prepare her syllabi for next semester. The following day, she would meet with her department about fall scheduling. And next week she would take the first step toward motherhood. With or without Richard's genetic contribution, with or without a partner, this child would be hers. Her choice, her love, her legacy. Emily sat rigid in the examination chair, staring at the ultrasound monitor in disbelief. "Did you say .3? Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Dr. Williams nodded, moving the wand slightly to showcase 3 distinct dark circles on the screen. 3 separate gestational sacs. Congratulations, Emily. You're carrying triplets." The room seemed to tilt slightly. 6 weeks ago, the insemination procedure had gone smoothly. 2 weeks later, a positive pregnancy test had left her elated but cautious. Now at her 8-week checkup, this unexpected development had changed everything. "Triplets," Emily repeated, the word foreign on her tongue. "But how? I mean, I know how, but..." "It's unusual with artificial insemination, but not unheard of," Dr. Williams explained. "The fertility medications can increase the chance of multiple eggs being released and fertilized. In your case, 3 eggs successfully implanted." Emily stared at the screen, at the 3 tiny lives growing inside her. Fear and wonder collided in her chest. Are they all healthy? So far, everything looks excellent. All 3 embryos are developing normally, with strong heartbeats. Outside the clinic, Emily sat in her car, hands trembling too much to insert the key. She rested her forehead against the steering wheel, trying to process the news. 1 baby had seemed manageable, challenging as a single mother, certainly, but doable. 3 babies simultaneously felt overwhelming. Her phone buzzed with a message from Nathan. "Hope the appointment went well. Coffee later?" Emily stared at the text, suddenly desperate to talk to someone who would understand the medical implications. Before she could second-guess herself, she called him. "Nathan, are you free now? I need to talk." An hour later, they sat in a quiet corner of the university botanical garden, away from curious colleagues and students. "Triplets," Nathan said, processing the news. "That's wow." "I know," Emily agreed, still dazed. "I kept asking Dr. Williams if she was sure." "How are you feeling about it?" Emily sighed, grateful for his straightforward question. "Terrified, excited, overwhelmed. I prepared for 1 baby, financially, emotionally, logistically. But 3? It's a lot to take in," he acknowledged. "But if anyone can handle this, it's you, Emily." She gave him a skeptical look. "You can't possibly know that." "Actually, I can," he said confidently. I've seen how methodical you are in your research, how deeply you care about your students, how thoroughly you prepare for everything. Those qualities make for an excellent mother, whether of one child or three. Tears welled unexpectedly in Emily's eyes. Thank you for that. I needed to hear it. Have you told anyone else yet? Just you, she admitted. I'll call Olivia tonight. And I need to inform my department chair about adjusting my maternity leave plans. As they walked through the garden, Emily found her panic gradually subsiding, replaced by a strange calm. 3 babies. 3 times the love, 3 times the chaos, 3 times the wonder. When I was selecting the donor, she said quietly, I never imagined this outcome. One child with features that might blend mine and the donor's characteristics seemed manageable. 3 children who might all strongly resemble their genetic father seems more complicated? Nathan suggested. Yes. They paused by a reflecting pool, watching koi fish dart beneath lily pads. Emily, Nathan said carefully, I know this isn't the time, but I want you to know that I'm here, not just as a friend who understands the medical aspects, but as someone who cares about you. Whatever support you need, you don't have to do this alone. The sincerity in his eyes touched her deeply. Thank you, she replied softly. That means more than I can say. That evening, after sharing the news with a jubilant Olivia, I'm going to be an aunt 3 times over, Emily sat on her balcony cradling a cup of herbal tea, one hand resting on her still flat abdomen. Hello in there, she whispered. This isn't what any of us planned, but we'll figure it out together. As the city lights blinked to life around her, Emily felt something she hadn't expected, a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. Whatever challenges lay ahead, these 3 unexpected lives were already hers to love, protect, and guide. Richard Thompson, with his empire and desperate need for an heir, would never know what he had lost. Push, Emily. You're almost there, Dr. Williams encouraged from behind her surgical mask. Emily, drenched in sweat and utterly exhausted after hours of labor, gripped the sides of the hospital bed and summoned her last reserves of strength. The delivery room buzzed with activity, nurses monitoring 3 separate sets of vital signs, pediatric specialists standing by, Nathan holding her hand despite her nearly crushing his fingers. I see the head, Dr. Williams announced. One more big push. With a primal cry, Emily bore down. Seconds later, a high-pitched wail filled the room. It's a boy, Dr. Williams declared, quickly passing the tiny infant to a waiting nurse. No time to rest, baby number 2 is coming. 4 minutes later, a second cry joined the first. Another boy, and 3 minutes after that, and a girl. You did it, Emily. Through tears of exhaustion and joy, Emily watched as 3 tiny humans, each weighing barely 5 pounds, were quickly assessed, swaddled, and finally miraculously placed in her arms one by one. Alexander, she whispered to the firstborn, who gazed up with unfocused eyes. Benjamin, to the second, who was already sleeping. Charlotte, to the third, whose tiny fingers curled reflexively around Emily's thumb. Nathan stood beside the bed, his eyes suspiciously bright. They're perfect, Emily, all 3 of them. Later, in a private room filled with flowers from colleagues and 3 bassinets arranged in a semicircle, Emily's parents and Olivia crowded around, marveling at the triplets. They looked just like you did as a baby, her mother insisted. Though, Emily could already see hints of the donor's contributions. The shape of Alexander's ears, Benjamin's chin, Charlotte's brow. 3 at once, her father kept repeating, both proud and dazed. My sensible plan everything daughter ended up with instant triplets. Nothing sensible about it, Emily laughed tiredly. But everything right? Nathan appeared in the doorway, with coffee for the adults and a stuffed animal for each baby. Over the past 6 months, he had become Emily's rock, accompanying her to appointments, helping assemble nursery furniture, even attending childbirth classes as her partner, despite the curious glances from other couples. The nursing staff is asking about the birth certificates, he said quietly to Emily. They need the full names. Emily looked at her 3 sleeping miracles. Alexander James Jenkins, she decided. Benjamin Thomas Jenkins. Charlotte Olivia Jenkins. Her sister gasped at the middle name. Really? Who else would I name her after? You've been there for everything. After her family departed, promising to return the next day to help her settle at home, Emily found herself alone with Nathan and the triplets. I never properly thanked you, she said softly, for everything these past months. Nathan smiled, gently rocking Benjamin's bassinet when he stirred. No thanks needed. It's been my privilege to be part of this journey. Emily watched him with the babies, his natural ease both surprising and touching. Most men would have run screaming at the prospect of befriending a pregnant woman with triplets on the way. I'm not most men, he replied simply. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibility. Then Charlotte began to fuss, and the practical needs of newborns took precedence over adult emotions. 6 weeks later, Emily sat in her living room surrounded by baby paraphernalia, attempting to grade papers while all 3 infants miraculously napped at once. The doorbell's chime sent her diving for the mute button on the baby monitor. Nathan stood on her doorstep with groceries and a takeout bag that smelled heavenly. Thought you might appreciate dinner that requires neither cooking nor cleaning, he said, surveying her disheveled appearance with a smile that held nothing but warmth. You are a lifesaver, Emily declared, ushering him in. They just fell asleep, all 3 at the same time, which basically makes this the equivalent of a solar eclipse in terms of rarity. As they ate on the couch amid burp cloths and tiny socks, Emily felt a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. What is it? Nathan asked, concerned. This isn't how I imagined my life would be, she admitted. But somehow it's better than anything I could have planned. Before Nathan could respond, Alexander's cry came through the monitor, soon joined by his siblings in a chorus that Emily was learning to distinguish by pitch and urgency. Duty calls, she sighed, rising. Our dinner will wait, Nathan assured, her already heading toward the nursery beside her. Our dinner, Emily thought. Our evening. Perhaps someday our family. Mom! Alexander took my dinosaur again. Did not. I had it first. Both of you stop or T-Rex goes in timeout. Emily called from the kitchen where she was attempting to pack 3 separate lunchboxes, while Charlotte sat quietly at the table, meticulously coloring within the lines of her drawing. 5 years had passed in what felt like both an eternity and the blink of an eye. The triplets, now kindergartners, had grown from helpless infants into distinct little people, with personalities as different as their identical birthdays. Alexander, born first and perpetually aware of his 2-minute seniority, was thoughtful and methodical. Benjamin was all energy and curiosity, constantly in motion. Charlotte, the surprise 3rd triplet, combined her brother's traits with a fierce independence and artistic flair that was entirely her own. Everyone has 10 minutes to finish getting ready for school, Emily announced, glancing at her watch. Nathan will be here any minute to drive us. As if summoned by her words, the doorbell rang. Charlotte abandoned her coloring and raced to the door, her brothers close behind. Daddy! 3 voices chorused as Nathan entered, immediately enveloped in small arms. Emily smiled at the scene, remembering the gradual evolution of their relationship. Nathan's consistent presence during her pregnancy had blossomed into something deeper during those early sleepless months with newborns. His proposal had come when the triplets were 8 months old. Simple, sincere, and perfectly timed during a rare moment of peace when all 3 babies were asleep. They'd married in a small ceremony when the triplets turned 1, Nathan carrying Alexander and Benjamin while Emily held Charlotte. 6 months later, he had formally adopted the children, making official what had already been true in every way that mattered. Sorry I'm running late, Nathan said, kissing Emily good morning. Emergency consultation at the hospital. Everything okay? She asked, handing him a travel mug of coffee. Just a complicated consent issue. Nothing that can't wait until after school drop-off. He surveyed the controlled chaos of their morning routine with an appreciative smile. Need help with anything? Convince your sons that dinosaurs can be shared? Emily suggested with a raised eyebrow. Nathan crouched down to the boy's level. Gentlemen, I believe the museum rules clearly state that paleontologists must take turns with their discoveries. This approach, framing the issue as a scientific protocol rather than a parental decree, worked immediately. The boys solemnly divided. Their dinosaur collection? Dispute forgotten. Emily shook her head in amused disbelief. How do you do that? Ancient dad magic, Nathan replied with a wink. The family piled into their minivan, the ultimate surrender of academic prestige to practical necessity. As Nathan navigated morning traffic, Emily reviewed her class notes for the day's lecture on constitutional interpretation. Professor Jenkins Miller is presenting at the law conference next month, Nathan announced to the children. Should we make a special banner for her office? With glitter, Charlotte declared. And dinosaurs, Benjamin added. And the Constitution, Alexander concluded solemnly, causing both parents to stifle laughter. After drop-off at the university's prestigious lab school, a perk of Emily's tenured position, she and Nathan walked together toward their respective buildings. Any updates on the Thompson case? Emily asked. Nathan's expertise in medical ethics had recently drawn him into a high-profile case involving reproductive rights that had been making headlines. Final arguments next week. I'm cautiously optimistic, he replied. Speaking of Thompson, he hesitated. I saw in the legal journal that Richard Thompson just won a major merger case. Apparently his firm is now valued at close to $100 million. Emily nodded, the name registering as little more than a footnote from her past life. Good for him. Nathan studied her face. You really are completely over it all, aren't you? I have been for years, she confirmed. Whatever pain he caused led me here, to you, to the children, to this life I love. I can't regret any of it. They paused outside the law building, their usual parting point. Dinner at 7? Nathan confirmed. My mother sent another package of clothes for the kids. Apparently, Connecticut grandmothers believe Chicago children need 17 sweaters each. Better than my mother's approach, 3 identical toys. That immediately cause ownership disputes, Emily laughed. Nathan kissed her goodbye and Emily watched him walk toward the medical school, feeling the familiar wave of gratitude for this man who had chosen to love not just her, but her children, as his own. Later that afternoon, Emily was reviewing student papers in her office when a photo on her desk caught her eye, the triplets at the beach last summer, their faces alight with joy. Alexander's serious expression had momentarily given way to uninhibited laughter. Benjamin was mid-leap into a wave. Charlotte was building an elaborate sand castle. For a brief, disconcerting moment, Emily saw something in Alexander's profile that reminded her startlingly of Richard. The shape of his jaw, the set of his eyes, genetic echoes she usually managed to overlook in the daily rush of life. The children bore her surname legally, with Nathan's added after their adoption. Their birth certificates listed no father, just donor, Nargir 8742. The careful choices she had made years ago had given her children a clear legal status, free from complications. Yet sometimes when the light hit just right, or when a certain expression crossed their faces, Emily was reminded of the genetic heritage that flowed through her children. Traits from a man who had no idea they existed, who had deemed her unworthy of motherhood due to his own unacknowledged limitations. She pushed the thought away, returning to her work. The past was the past. Her children were hers, and Nathan's, in every way that truly mattered. The anonymous donor who had made their existence possible was nothing more than that. Anonymous, distant, irrelevant to their daily lives and love, or so she believed, until the day everything changed. Dr. Jenkins Miller, your husband is on line 1, Emily's assistant called through the intercom. Emily was in the middle of a faculty meeting, discussing curriculum changes for the upcoming semester. Can you take a message? I'll call him back. He says it's urgent. Something about Alexander. A chill ran through Emily. Nathan rarely interrupted her meetings. Excuse me, she said to her colleagues, hurrying to her office. Nathan, what's wrong? Alex fell during recess, Nathan explained, his doctor's voice calm but tinged with concern. Possible broken arm. I'm at the University Medical Center with him now. 20 minutes later, Emily rushed into the pediatric emergency room to find Alexander sitting bravely on an exam table, his right arm in a temporary splint. Nathan stood beside him, one hand reassuringly on their son's shoulder. "Mom." Alexander's face brightened despite his pain. "I fell from the monkey bars. Dr. Simmons says I need a cast." Emily kissed his forehead, relief replacing her panic. "That's quite an adventure, sweetheart. I told Ben and Charlie not to climb so high, but then I fell instead," he explained earnestly. It was very ironic. Emily and Nathan exchanged amused glances at their 8-year-old's vocabulary. "Where are your brother and sister?" Emily asked. "My teaching assistant took them to the faculty lounge," Nathan explained. "Your parents are on their way to pick them up." The next hour passed in a blur of x-rays, forms, and finally the application of a blue cast that Alexander deemed scientifically interesting. By evening, all 3 children were settled at home, Benjamin and Charlotte taking turns signing their brother's cast with careful concentration. After bedtime stories and lights out, Emily collapsed onto the living room sofa beside Nathan. "Some day," she sighed, resting her head on his shoulder. "Some kid," Nathan replied with a chuckle. "The orthopedist said she rarely sees 8-year-olds who can accurately describe the radius and ulna. Wonder where he gets that from, Dr. Miller?" Nathan smiled, pulling her closer. "Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about something related to that." Emily raised an eyebrow. "To broken arms?" "To genetics, actually," he clarified. "Benjamin's teacher mentioned he's showing remarkable aptitude for mathematics, well beyond grade level. She suggested advanced testing." "That's wonderful," Emily said, then noted Nathan's pensive expression. "Isn't it?" "It is," he agreed. "It just got me thinking about nature versus nurture, about what traits come from where." Emily tensed slightly. "The kids have your influence every day. You're their father in every way that matters." "I know that," Nathan assured her. "And I couldn't love them more if they shared my DNA. But I wonder if someday they'll have questions about their biological origins that we should be prepared to answer." Emily had considered this inevitability, but always as a distant future concern. They're only 8, and already noticing patterns. Last week, Charlotte asked why she and her brothers all have the same birthday when most siblings don't. Emily smiled despite her unease. "What did you tell her?" "That they were a special package deal." She seemed satisfied with that for now. They sat in comfortable silence, both contemplating the complexities of the conversation that would someday come. "I ordered something," Nathan admitted finally. "A book about discussing donor conception with children. It's age-appropriate, addresses different family structures. I thought we could review it together, decide if the timing is right." Emily squeezed his hand, grateful for his thoughtfulness. "That sounds perfect." Later that night, unable to sleep, Emily opened her laptop to finish grading papers. A news alert popped up in her email, her university's press office highlighting faculty achievements. The headline caught her eye. "Law School to Honor Distinguished Alumni at Annual Gala." Scanning the article, a familiar name leapt from the screen. Richard Thompson would be receiving the Distinguished Alumni Achievement Award next month. There was even a photo, Richard looking older but still commanding, silver threading through his dark hair, standing before the Chicago skyline with the confidence of a man who owned the world. Emily closed the laptop, suddenly transported back to another life, arguments about fertility, accusations, the cold delivery of divorce papers. How strange that the man who had once been the center of her world now seemed like a character from a book she'd read long ago. She glanced at the family photos lining their hallway, the triplets' birth, their first birthday with Nathan, family vacations, ordinary moments made extraordinary by love. Richard Thompson had rejected her based on a flawed assumption about her worth. In doing so, he had set her free to find something far more valuable than his empire could ever be. "Mom, we're going to be late," Charlotte called up the stairs, her voice tinged with the dramatic urgency only a 10-year-old could muster for a routine Monday morning. "Coming," Emily replied, hurriedly fastening her earrings. She paused briefly to look at her reflection. A few more silver strands in her hair, laugh lines around her eyes. 45 looked good on her, she decided. Better than 35 had. Downstairs, organized chaos reigned. Alexander packed his science project into a cardboard box with methodical care. Benjamin wolfed down a second bowl of cereal, while simultaneously tying his shoes, a multitasking feat that never ceased to amaze his parents. Charlotte checked her backpack for the third time, ensuring her art portfolio was properly arranged. Nathan moved through this familiar choreography with practiced ease, pouring coffee into travel mugs, checking permission slips, and mediating a brief dispute over whose turn it was to feed Winston, their perpetually hungry golden retriever. "Who has soccer today?" he asked, consulting the family calendar on the refrigerator. "Me and Ben," Charlotte answered. "Alex has debate club." "I'll pick up the soccer stars. You get the future Supreme Court Justice," Nathan suggested to Emily, handing her a travel mug. "Perfect. I have a department meeting but should be done by 4. She accepted the coffee with a quick kiss. "Don't forget I'm flying to New York tomorrow for that reproductive rights conference. 3 days without Mom." Benjamin sighed dramatically. "How will we survive?" "Pizza every night," Nathan declared, earning cheers from the children and a mock stern look from Emily. "1 pizza night," she corrected. "The rest, actual vegetables, must be consumed." The morning routine continued like a well-rehearsed play. Backpacks collected, lunches distributed, last-minute homework questions answered. Emily savored these moments, the ordinary perfection of their family life. "Dad, are you coming to my debate on Thursday?" Alexander asked as they headed to the car. "I'm arguing the constitutional case for expanding privacy rights." "Wouldn't miss it," Nathan assured him. "Your mom will be back just in time, too." In the car, Benjamin launched into an elaborate explanation of his latest science experiment. Charlotte sketched in her notebook, and Alexander quietly reviewed his debate notes. Emily exchanged a glance with Nathan, their shared look communicating everything words couldn't. Amazement at these 3 remarkable humans they were raising, gratitude for their life together, the deep contentment of ordinary days. After school, drop-off, Nathan and Emily walked hand-in-hand across campus toward their respective buildings. "I'll miss you these next few days," Nathan said. "The kids too, though they'll pretend to enjoy the break from vegetable enforcement." Emily laughed. 3 days will fly by. I've left detailed instructions on the kitchen counter, color-coded by child." "Of course you have," he teased. As if, "We haven't been doing this dance for a decade." They paused at their usual parting point. "I love you," Emily said, suddenly feeling an inexplicable urge to say the words out loud. "I love you too," Nathan replied, his expression softening. I'm dead in New York." Her day unfolded with comfortable predictability. Lectures, student consultations, faculty meetings. By late afternoon, she was reviewing her presentation for the New York conference when her phone rang. "Hi, Mom," she answered, seeing her mother's name on the screen. "Just checking your flight details for tomorrow," her mother said. "Dad and I thought we might drop by tonight with those books Alexander wanted." "That would be lovely," Emily replied. "We should be home by 6. Nathan's making his famous lasagna." "Perfect. See you then, dear." After ending the call, Emily glanced at the family photo on her desk. Last summer's vacation in Maine, all 5 of them windblown and laughing on a rocky beach. Her heart swelled with a sudden, fierce love. How had she gotten so lucky? She quickly sent a text to Nathan. "Can't wait for lasagna night. Tell the kids I'm bringing surprise cookies from that bakery they love." His reply came seconds later. "Now who's undermining the vegetable agenda? See you at home, love." Emily smiled, packed her presentation materials, and headed out of her office, unaware that this ordinary, perfect day would be her last. Nathan was in the middle of a lecture when his phone vibrated urgently in his pocket. He ignored it at first, a habit from years of medical practice, but when it buzzed a second and third time in rapid succession, a sense of unease prompted him to glance at the screen. 3 missed calls from an unknown New York number. Excuse me, he told his student, stepping into the hallway. The phone rang again immediately. Dr. Miller speaking. Dr. Miller, this is Officer Rodriguez with the NYPD. I'm calling about your wife, Emily Jenkins Miller. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Nathan listened to the officer's measured voice explaining the unthinkable. A taxi Emily had been riding in from the airport had been struck by a delivery truck that ran a red light. The impact had been catastrophic. She's being transported to Manhattan General, the officer continued. The paramedics suggested you should come as soon as possible. Nathan's medical training took over, suppressing the rising panic. How severe are her injuries? Is she conscious? A slight hesitation. Sir, I think you should speak with the hospital directly. They'll have more information. Within minutes, Nathan had arranged emergency coverage for his classes and was on the phone with the hospital's trauma department. The attending physician's grave tone confirmed his worst fears. Dr. Miller, your wife sustained massive internal injuries and severe head trauma. We're doing everything possible, but you should prepare yourself. If you can get here, I'm booking a flight now. Nathan interrupted, already pulling up airlines on his laptop. Please just keep her alive until I get there. The next call was the hardest, to Emily's parents, who had just seen their daughter the night before, who had hugged her goodbye and said, "See you in 3 days, dear." John, it's Nathan. Something's happened to Emily. I need you to pick up the children from school. How did one prepare children for such news? Nathan's mind raced as he threw clothes into a suitcase. Should he tell them before leaving? Wait until he knew more. His years of delivering difficult medical news to patients offered no guidance for telling 3 10-year-olds that their mother might not come home. In the end, time made the decision for him. His flight was departing in 90 minutes. Emily's parents arrived at the house, ashen-faced but resolute. We'll keep them home from school tomorrow, John said, his voice breaking. Call us the moment you know anything. Don't tell them yet, Nathan pleaded. Not until I can be with them, or until we know for certain. The flight to New York was the longest 2 hours of Nathan's life. He alternated between frantic prayers and clinical calculations of survival rates for multi-system trauma. His medical knowledge, usually a comfort, now tortured him with precise understanding of what Emily might be enduring. When his phone rang immediately after landing, he knew before answering. Dr. Miller? This is Dr. Patel at Manhattan General. I'm so sorry, but your wife succumbed to her injuries 15 minutes ago. We did everything possible, but the trauma was too extensive. Nathan sank into an airport chair, his legs no longer able to support him. Was she in pain? At the end? No, the doctor assured him. She never regained consciousness after the accident. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of medical forms, funeral arrangements, and the surreal task of packing Emily's conference materials from a hotel room she had never reached. Nathan moved through it all with mechanical detachment, postponing his own grief until the most pressing decisions were made. Then came the moment he had been dreading above all others. Sitting in Emily's parents' living room, surrounded by her childhood photos, Nathan gathered the triplets close. I need to tell you something very difficult, he began, his doctor's composure finally crumbling. There was an accident in New York. Mom was hurt very badly. But doctors fixed her, right? Benjamin asked, his voice small. Nathan shook his head, tears flowing freely now. No, buddy. The doctors tried everything, but Mom's injuries were too severe. She died yesterday afternoon. The children's reactions cut him to the core. Alexander's stunned silence, Benjamin's immediate denial, Charlotte's heartbreaking wail. As he gathered all 3 into his arms, their small bodies shaking with incomprehensible grief, Nathan made a silent promise to Emily. I will protect them. I will love them enough for both of us. Always. Richard. Thompson adjusted his tie in the car mirror before stepping out into the spring sunshine. He hadn't planned to attend the funeral. He'd only learned of Emily's death through a law school alumni newsletter. But something had drawn him here. A need for closure, perhaps, or simple curiosity about the life of the woman who had once been his wife. The university chapel was already filling with mourners when he slipped in, taking a seat in the last row. Faculty members in academic regalia, students clutching handwritten notes, family friends carrying flowers. Emily had clearly been beloved by many. In the 15 years since their divorce, Richard had thought of her occasionally, usually when something reminded him of their law school days or when he heard her name mentioned in academic circles. He had followed her career from a distance, noting her publications and promotions with detached interest. His own life had taken the trajectory he'd planned. He'd built Thompson Legal into a powerhouse firm valued at over $100 million. His marriage to Judge Vanessa Parker had lasted 6 years before ending in another childless divorce. At 57, Richard had everything he'd worked for, except the one thing he'd originally divorced Emily to acquire: an heir. The irony wasn't lost on him. Medical tests years after their split had confirmed what Emily had suggested. The fertility issue had indeed been his. But pride and momentum had kept him from ever acknowledging this to her, and eventually it seemed too late for such admissions. The organ music shifted, signaling the start of the service. Richard straightened in his seat as the immediate family entered. First came an older couple, Emily's parents, he assumed, though they looked much frailer than he remembered. Then a woman who resembled Emily, her sister Olivia, if memory served. Finally, a tall, distinguished man with graying temples entered, guiding 3 children before him. Richard's breath caught in his throat. The children, clearly triplets despite their individual expressions, appeared to be about 10 years old. 2 boys and a girl, all with dark hair, straight noses, and unmistakable blue eyes. The first boy walked with a solemn, measured pace, his posture painfully familiar. The second had the same features but moved with nervous energy, unable to stand completely still even in his grief. The girl between them had Emily's chin but otherwise could have been a younger feminine version of. Richard felt the blood drain from his face. Of him. They looked like him. It wasn't possible. He and Emily had been divorced for 15 years. These children couldn't be more than 10 or 11, and yet, as they turned to sit in the front pew, the profile of the first boy was so strikingly similar to his childhood photos that Richard felt physically struck. Throughout the service, he barely heard the eulogies and prayers, his attention fixed on the 3 small figures in the front row. The man beside them, Dr. Nathan Miller, according to the program, kept a protective arm around the children, occasionally wiping tears from his own eyes or comforting one of the triplets when their composure broke. Emily Jenkins Miller leaves behind her husband, Dr. Nathan Miller, and their beloved children, Alexander, Benjamin, and Charlotte. The minister intoned. Jenkins Miller. She had kept her maiden name professionally then, and Miller must be their stepfather or adoptive father. Richard's mind raced, calculating timelines, possibilities, implications. When the service concluded, mourners filed past the family, offering condolences. Richard lingered, watching the interactions from a distance. The triplets accepted hugs and kind words with varying degrees of composure. The serious one stoic, the energetic one fighting tears, the girl openly weeping against her father's side. Richard found himself moving forward in the line, drawn by an inexplicable force. When he finally stood before the family, Dr. Miller looked up with the polite, vacant expression of one receiving too many condolences to process individually. "I'm sorry for your loss," Richard said formally. Then, his eyes shifting to the children. "Emily and I were colleagues many years ago." The serious boy, Alexander, looked up sharply, studying Richard with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. Those eyes. His eyes. "Thank you for coming," Dr. Miller replied, his arm tightening almost imperceptibly around the children as Richard walked away. His legal mind was already assembling facts, formulating questions, and considering implications that would soon shatter multiple lives. 3 days after the funeral, Nathan sat at the kitchen table sorting through condolence cards while the children slept upstairs. The house felt impossibly quiet without Emily's presence. No gentle humming as she worked, no keyboard tapping late into the night, no soft footsteps checking on the children. The doorbell rang, startling him from his grief. At 9 p.m. it was too late for the well-meaning neighbors who had been dropping off casseroles and too early for the occasional college student confusing their address with the fraternity down the street. Nathan opened the door to find a distinguished older man in an expensive suit, flanked by two younger men carrying briefcases. "Dr. Miller?" The older man asked. "I'm Richard Thompson. These are my associates. We need to speak with you about a matter of some urgency." Nathan's body went cold with recognition. Emily had described her ex-husband many times. His commanding presence, his authoritative tone, his absolute certainty in his own rightness. But it was the man's eyes that confirmed his identity, the same striking blue that Alexander and Benjamin had inherited. "This isn't a good time," Nathan said firmly. "My children are asleep." "That's precisely what we need to discuss," Thompson replied. "Your children, or rather whether they are in fact yours." Nathan stepped onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind him. "Whatever you think you know, this isn't the way to address it. My family is grieving." "I understand that," Thompson said, his tone softening slightly. "But certain facts have come to my attention that cannot wait. The striking resemblance between those children and myself is not coincidental. I think you should leave. Dr. Miller, I've consulted with experts in reproductive and family law. The timing aligns perfectly. Emily and I divorced 15 years ago. Within months, she underwent artificial insemination. The triplets were born approximately 9 months later. They have my eyes, my features. They have Emily's smile, her compassion, her intelligence," Nathan interrupted. "And they have my name, legally and lovingly given." Thompson's expression hardened. "I suspect she used stored genetic material from our marriage or somehow obtained a sample to deliberately create children with my DNA without my knowledge or consent." Nathan maintained his composure with effort. "You rejected Emily based on the false assumption she couldn't bear children. You never even considered your own role in your fertility issues." A flicker of discomfort crossed Thompson's face before he recovered. "That's irrelevant to the current situation. If those children are biologically mine, they're not," Nathan stated firmly. "Biologically, they are Emily's children, conceived through an anonymous donor. Legally and emotionally, they are our children, Emily's and mine." One of the younger attorneys stepped forward. "Dr. Miller, we're prepared to petition the court for DNA testing. Mr. Thompson has rights that—" "Rights?" Nathan's voice remained controlled but intense. "Where were these rights when Emily needed support during pregnancy? During midnight feedings? During homework struggles and nightmares and chicken pox? Where were they during a decade of birthday, parties, school plays, and everyday moments that constitute actual parenting? Legal rights exist regardless of presence," the attorney persisted. "Come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m., Nathan said, surprising all three men. "University Medical Center, Department of Medical Ethics. Bring your legal team if you wish." Thompson's eyebrows rose. "You're willing to discuss terms?" "I'm willing to end this conversation before it wakes my grieving children. Tomorrow, in a professional setting, I'll provide what you need to understand the situation fully." After they departed, Nathan leaned against the closed door, heart racing. For years, he and Emily had prepared for this remote possibility. Legal, documentation meticulously maintained, adoption paperwork bulletproof, the children's legal status secured in multiple ways. Tomorrow would test whether their precautions had been sufficient. Upstairs, he checked on each sleeping child. Alexander curled around a book, Benjamin sprawled across his bed, Charlotte clutching the stuffed otter Emily had given her. Nathan's resolve solidified with each small, peaceful face. These were his children, Emily's children. No matter what genetic material had contributed to their existence, no legal claim could change the fundamental truth of who they were and who had earned the right to be called their parent. Richard Thompson might have wealth, legal expertise, and potential biological connections, but Nathan had something far more valuable: years of real fatherhood and Emily's complete trust in his ability to protect their family. Richard arrived at Nathan's office flanked by 3 attorneys, their briefcases bulging with legal documents. The medical ethics department's conference room offered a neutral ground for what promised to be a contentious meeting. Nathan sat alone at the table, a single manila folder before him. No legal representation, no show of force, just calm certainty. "Dr. Miller," Richard began, "I appreciate your willingness to meet. My attorneys have prepared." "Before we proceed," Nathan interrupted gently, "I'd like you to look at something." He opened the folder and pushed a document across the table. It was a certified copy of a donor agreement from Lakeside Fertility Clinic, dated 15 years earlier. "What am I looking at?" Richard asked. "Emily selected donor Ndarger 8742 from Lakeside's anonymous donor program," Nathan explained. "This donor signed comprehensive legal agreements relinquishing all parental rights and maintaining complete anonymity in perpetuity." Richard scanned the document. "This proves nothing about the donor's identity." Nathan slid forward another paper, a birth certificate listing Emily Jenkins as mother, father listed as anonymous donor. "The children's legal status has never been in question," Nathan continued. "Furthermore, I legally adopted them when they were 1 year old with all proper procedures followed. The children are legally mine in every way that matters." "DNA doesn't lie," one of Richard's attorneys interjected. "If Mr. Thompson is their biological father." "He's not," Nathan stated firmly. Donor Ndarger 8742 was selected from Lakeside's database for specific characteristics. Emily chose a donor with traits similar to her ex-husband's physical appearance. This is common practice for single mothers. It reduces questions about the children's appearance. Richard stared at the documentation, his certainty wavering. "You expect me to believe this is all coincidence? The timing, the resemblance." "Not coincidence. Deliberate selection of traits," Nathan corrected. "But not your genetic material." Nathan placed a final document on the table, a certified statement from Lakeside Fertility confirming the complete anonymity of all donors and the impossibility of Emily accessing any specific person's genetic material without consent. "Mr. Thompson," Nathan said quietly, "Emily knew you would never consent to being a donor. She also knew after your divorce that the fertility issue had been yours all along. She moved on. She created a family with a donor who remained anonymous, as was his right. Then she found love again, with me." Richard's composure finally cracked. "I had a right to know if—" "You had no rights in this matter," Nathan replied firmly but not unkindly. "You divorced Emily believing she was defective. You refused testing that would have revealed the truth. You made your choice 15 years ago, and Emily made hers." Silence fell over the room. Richard's attorneys exchanged glances, clearly recognizing the solidity of Nathan's position. "We'll need to verify these documents," one finally said. "Of course, but you should know that pursuing this further will only bring pain to 3 children who have just lost their mother. It will not change the legal outcome." After the lawyers excused themselves to confer in the hallway, Richard remained seated, staring at the birth certificates. "I saw myself in them," he said softly. "You saw what Emily chose, traits similar to yours from an anonymous donor. Nothing more." Richard looked up, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I was wrong. About Emily, about many things." Nathan nodded, neither condemning nor absolving. "The children," Richard asked hesitantly, "are they, well?" "They're extraordinary," Nathan answered. "Emily made sure of that." When Richard left Nathan's office, something fundamental had changed within him. His legal claim had evaporated, but more significantly, his understanding of what truly constituted a legacy had been irrevocably altered. 3 weeks later, Nathan received formal notification that Thompson had withdrawn all inquiries regarding the children. Accompanying this was a letter addressed to the Miller Children's Education Trust and documentation of a $45 million endowment, nearly half of Thompson's fortune, with the stipulation that the children never be informed of its source. In his penthouse that night, Richard finalized arrangements to sell his remaining holdings. Within days, he would depart for a remote property in Alaska, leaving behind the empire he had once valued above all else. As he packed a single photo, Emily on their wedding day, smiling with hope that had later been crushed by his pride, Richard finally acknowledged the truth he had spent decades avoiding. His greatest failure had not been his inability to father children, but his inability to recognize what true fatherhood meant. Meanwhile, in a house still adjusting to the absence of its heart, Nathan helped 3 children plant a memorial garden for their mother, their hands working together in the soil Emily had loved, creating something new, beautiful, and enduring from grief.